In the fading light of an autumn sunset in the Wyoming Territory, the mournful call of a lone whippoorwill stirred whispers of forgotten secrets carried on the prairie wind. Josie Calloway paused, leaning against the rough cedar railing of her ranch porch. She watched the horizon as the sun dipped beneath the distant mountains, painting the heavens in fading strokes of amber and rose. Her eyes lingered, calm on the surface. Yet beneath the quiet of her gaze lay an unsettled shadow, a subtle stirring in her heart she hadn't felt in years. She thought of another autumn sunset long ago, when shadows had swallowed a younger woman's life whole. The familiar ache of those memories pressed in gently, touching her heart with their weight. Yet Josie had spent the past decade burying them deeply beneath the peaceful rhythms of ranch life, where the days passed simply and the nights were quiet. Tonight, though, the prairie wind had a voice of its own, soft yet insistent, carrying with it a vague unease she couldn't quite name. Behind her, the horses stirred in their stalls, nickering quietly in the gathering dusk. Josie turned slowly, inhaling the sweet scent of fresh hay and worn saddle leather drifting on the evening breeze. Her horses were her pride, strong, beautiful animals she had raised and nurtured with a tenderness born of a past that had known too much violence. She crossed the yard to the barn, the crunch of her boots on gravel a comforting familiarity. As she stepped inside, Josie reached for the oil lamp hanging beside the wide barn door, lighting it with practiced care. The soft amber glow spread warmth across the walls, casting gentle shadows over neatly stacked saddles, rows of polished tack, and sturdy wooden stalls. One stall stood open, empty. Josie stopped, sudden unease twisting sharply within her. She stepped quickly to the stall, fingers gripping the splintered gate that had swung open as if yanked by a careless hand. Her breath caught as she saw the ground, fresh hoofprints pressed sharply into the thin dust and leading out into the open prairie beyond. A sound drew her attention sharply back toward the porch. Sheriff Elias Holt stood there, silhouetted against the dimming twilight. Elias was a rugged man in his early 50s, with eyes weathered by hard years and harder justice. They had known each other since Josie first arrived in Clearwater, forging a quiet trust born of mutual respect and shared silence. "Evening, Josie," he called softly, removing his wide-brimmed hat, revealing hair grayed prematurely by responsibility. His voice carried the weariness of a man who had seen too many good people hurt, too many bad men go free. "Elias," Josie replied, fighting the edge of worry that had crept into her voice. "Seems trouble's found its way back again." He nodded slowly, eyes shifting toward the open stall. "Afraid so. Morgan gangs in the area again. Heard they hit a ranch over near Dry Cedar Bluff town. Burned it straight to the ground." Josie swallowed a bitter taste rising in her throat, feeling the calm veneer she had carefully maintained slipping slightly. She had heard whispers of the Morgan gang, a ruthless band preying on isolated ranches and towns. They were more than ordinary thieves. They were ghosts, slipping quietly into lives and leaving nothing behind but ashes and memories. Elias stepped closer, voice quiet, respectful. "Josie, listen. I don't want to pry, but men like that, they got long memories, memories of old scores to settle. I reckon you know what I mean." She met his eyes, understanding passing silently between them. Elias had always respected her privacy, but his warning stirred echoes she had long silenced. Without another word, Josie reached into the folds of her worn riding jacket and withdrew an engraved silver pocket watch, tarnished with age, yet gleaming softly in the lamplight. Her father's watch, hidden carefully for years. Now the quiet ticking seemed louder than any warning Elias could give. "This was my father's," she said quietly, letting her thumb trace the engraving. "He believed in justice, Elias, but justice never seemed to find him in time." Elias shifted uncomfortably, aware he was stepping into old shadows better left untouched. "I'm sorry, Josie. But if the Morgans took your horse, they're sending a message. They ain't planning to stop at one horse." Josie closed the watch softly, hiding it once again in her pocket. She glanced back toward the horizon, darkness settling like a heavy curtain. Elias tipped his hat again, stepping away quietly, allowing her privacy in her troubled thoughts. As he moved away into the darkness, she felt the cool wind once more, whispers of memories and long shadows of a past she had nearly convinced herself was gone forever. She returned to the empty stall. Kneeling to examine the prints again, her fingers brushed over them lightly, reading their direction and force. Whoever took her prized stallion knew exactly what they were doing and exactly where they were heading. Josie's jaw tightened. They had taken more than a horse. They had taken a symbol of peace she had so desperately tried to protect. The quiet life she'd built, shielded from the nightmares of her former self, now lay as exposed as the open prairie. Josie stood slowly, resolve hardening into determination. Crossing the yard, she entered the house, each step echoing with purpose. Inside, she carefully removed a floorboard beneath the hearth, lifting it aside. Her heart quickened as her fingers touched the familiar grip of her old revolver, the steel smooth and cool against her palm. She hesitated for only a heartbeat, feeling a mixture of regret and resolve before slipping the weapon into the holster at her waist. The soft chime of the silver pocket watch in her coat pocket echoed softly in the silent room. Each gentle tick a quiet reminder of unfinished business, of truths buried but never forgotten. Josie stood at the window, staring out into the darkness, knowing exactly what came next. The Morgans had made their move, but they had miscalculated. They had thought to frighten an ordinary widow, a rancher living in isolation, but they hadn't accounted for who she had once been. She could sense it now. Feel it stirring beneath the carefully built life she'd created. It was like waking a ghost, a shadowed figure she'd left behind when she'd turned her back on violence. And yet, that shadowed figure had never truly vanished. It had merely slept, waiting patiently for a reason to awaken again. Josie turned toward the door, stepping outside onto the porch, the silver moon above casting its gentle light upon the land. She gazed across the familiar hills and plains, knowing the landscape by heart. The horse thieves had chosen their path, but they would not get far. This was land she had known intimately for years, trails she'd followed in her youth, hiding places she'd mapped when the life of a bounty hunter had defined her days and haunted her nights. There, beneath the soft moonlight, Josie traced the fresh hoofprints in the snow-dusted earth. Her fingers touched the rough wooden rail, its texture comforting and real beneath her hand. This was her ranch, her sanctuary, and she would not abandon it without a fight. Her enemies had underestimated the woman they faced, and she would remind them swiftly, surely, who she truly was. Josie took a deep breath, tasting the cold Wyoming air, feeling her heart steady itself for what lay ahead. They've taken more than a horse. They've awakened a ghost. The distant cry of an eagle pierced the crisp morning air, carrying whispers of forgotten justice across the barren hills. Josie Calloway nudged her horse forward, feeling the rhythmic comfort of the animal beneath her. She had been riding since before sunrise, the shadows long and cool against the pale grass, and the mountains loomed silently around her, like old sentinels guarding ancient secrets. Last night's events had stirred old echoes within her, and now each hoofbeat resonated as a quiet reminder of her previous life, a life she'd buried deep beneath floorboards and dust, believing it would stay hidden forever. Clearwater lay ahead, nestled in a shallow valley like a faded photograph, still familiar, yet shadowed by years. She'd rarely ventured into town these days, preferring the quiet solitude of her ranch. Now necessity drew her closer, pulling her toward old memories that clung stubbornly to the streets and alleyways like lingering smoke from distant fires. As Josie entered Clearwater, she passed the remains of an abandoned trading post at the edge of town. Long abandoned, its paint had faded into weathered gray, signs barely legible beneath layers of rust and decay. Josie paused. The creaking of the weathered wood beneath her horse's hooves whispering softly. A forgotten truth lay hidden within these rotted boards. Old truths she had carefully tucked away, but which now called softly to her again. Dismounting slowly, Josie approached the old building, running fingers across the warped wooden slats of the porch railing. Inside, dim sunlight illuminated floating dust motes, catching briefly in the beam streaming through cracks in the aging walls. She remembered this place well. The creak of footsteps, whispered deals made in shadowed corners, bounty posters nailed up hastily. Beneath one loose floorboard lay secrets she'd hoped would never need revisiting. Bending to pry the board loose, Josie reached into the dusty darkness, her fingers brushing the edges of brittle paper. Carefully withdrawing the hidden cash, she felt her heart tighten at the sight. Faded bounty posters, letters scrawled hurriedly in her own younger hand. These papers bore witness to a life driven by restless justice, debts unpaid, and dangerous choices she'd thought left behind. A soft shuffle broke her reverie. She turned sharply, instinct guiding her hand toward the revolver holstered at her hip, only to pause when she recognized the familiar silhouette in the doorway. Samuel Maddox stood watching her, his sharp eyes warm yet wary beneath his battered felt hat. The old trapper's face, lined from years spent braving bitter winds and harsh truths, softened into a careful smile. "Didn't think I'd ever see you back here, Josie," he murmured, stepping slowly inside. "Ghosts ain't meant to rise again." Josie smiled softly, the tension easing slightly from her shoulders. "Sometimes we ain't given much choice, Sam." Samuel nodded, eyes reflecting a lifetime of understanding. Words spreading fast. The Morgans stirred up trouble again. Folks are scared. Whispering rumors of traitors among their own. Josie considered his words carefully, her eyes tracing the faded lettering on one of the bounty posters. "What do you know, Sam?" He shifted uncomfortably, glancing towards the door before leaning closer. "There's whispers of an informant. Someone close, trusted, feeding the Morgans names, places, routines. Folks here are losing trust, turning suspicious eyes on each other." Josie absorbed his words with a heavy heart. Understanding the damage suspicion could bring to an already fragile community. She'd seen this before, seen suspicion tear friendships apart, unravel towns at their seams. "Any idea who?" Samuel shook his head. "Only whispers. But those whispers grow louder each day, Josie. This ain't like before. People are afraid, losing faith. They need something, or someone to believe in again." A gentle creak at the porch door brought both heads turning sharply. Deputy Aaron Cole stood awkwardly framed in the doorway, hat twisted nervously in his youthful hands. Aaron was barely more than 20, fresh-faced and earnest, always eager to please Sheriff Holt. Now he stared at Josie with a mix of awe and embarrassment, clearly hesitant to interrupt. "Sorry, ma'am," Aaron stammered, stepping uncertainly inside. I overheard part of what you said. About the Morgans. If there's trouble, I want to help. Sheriff Holt's worried, but he keeps things quiet. Maybe too quiet." Josie regarded the young deputy thoughtfully, recognizing the sincerity in his voice, the honest willingness to protect his town. "Sometimes quiet is safer, Aaron." He nodded respectfully, but didn't yield. "Sheriff always says you know things, ma'am. That folks respect you for a reason. I want to do right by Clearwater. Same as you." Josie hesitated, understanding the dangerous path this young man might be eager to tread. Glancing at Samuel, she saw mirrored concern in his eyes, recognizing Aaron's youthful eagerness as a liability. But loyalty mattered. Courage, even untested, could never be dismissed lightly. Sometimes doing right means knowing when to stay quiet, Josie said gently, careful not to extinguish his hope. Let us handle this. Promise me you'll be careful. Aaron nodded slowly, disappointment evident, but tempered by respect. I promise, ma'am. As he retreated from the building, Samuel sighed softly. He's eager, too eager. Josie nodded, troubled but resigned. He reminds me of myself, Sam, when I was young, angry, full of justice. Before I learned justice don't always come clean or easy. Samuel touched her shoulder lightly, comfortingly. What'll you do now? Josie's eyes drifted back toward the cache of papers, fingers brushing again against brittle edges. Each faded word whispered memories of mistakes, debts, justice she'd thought achieved, but now appeared painfully incomplete. Old debts don't die easy, she murmured. Seems they just wait in the dust until someone stirs them back up again. Samuel squeezed her shoulder gently, a silent promise of loyalty and aid. Be careful, Josie. Sometimes stirring old dust reveals more than we bargained for. Josie lingered after Samuel departed, carefully folding the papers and hiding them once more beneath the warped floorboard. As she stepped back into the crisp sunlight, she felt eyes watching, townsfolk whispering, wondering, speculating. The weight of her past life settled heavily again on her shoulders, urging caution, patience, wisdom. But another voice, urgent, insistent, pressed her toward action. Justice delayed was justice denied, and the town needed answers. Mounting her horse, Josie considered her next move carefully. She had spent years hiding, keeping distance between past deeds and present peace. But she had once walked boldly, seeking justice with steady resolve. Now the path was clearer, yet darker, the stakes higher, more personal. She rode slowly toward home, the quiet solitude of the prairie helping her find clarity amid the turmoil within. As her ranch appeared on the horizon, Josie paused at the edge of the high grass, watching smoke rise in a thin gray column from the neighboring hills. Her heartbeat quickened. Smoke meant trouble, and trouble in these times rarely came without violence or betrayal. Instinct whispered sharply, compelling urgency, drawing her toward the smoldering aftermath. With quiet resolve, Josie guided her horse toward the smoke, each step forward a determined acceptance of truths long hidden. She had run from these shadows long enough. Now, it seemed, the shadows had finally found her, demanding she face the past she'd so carefully concealed. The wind shifted, carrying the acrid smell of burning wood and scorched earth, reminding her sharply of another fire, one from her youth, fierce and cleansing. Josie shivered softly, the memory poignant, raw. Then, ahead, she saw clearly. The charred remains of a ranch, embers glowing weakly, fences blackened, the earth scarred and angry. Recognition tightened painfully in her chest. The Rivers Ranch. Her horse picked a cautious path through smoldering debris, Josie's heart aching at the sight of devastation. And then, there, partially buried beneath smoking timbers, Josie caught sight of something familiar. Kneeling carefully, heart pounding painfully, she brushed away ash and pulled free a charred fragment of cloth, patterned uniquely. It belonged to someone trusted, someone she knew well. The realization cut deeper than betrayal. It meant trust itself had become dangerous, that those closest could harbor the darkest secrets. Standing slowly, Josie gripped the burned cloth tightly, breath shuddering in quiet disbelief. Clearwater wasn't merely threatened from without. Danger lurked within, hidden behind familiar faces and friendly greetings. Holding the charred cloth tightly, Josie felt a cold dread settle in her chest and whispered, "The real enemy isn't out there. It's right here among us." In the chill of dawn, as mist hovered like lost souls among gravestones, unanswered questions whispered softly from the earth itself. Josie Calloway stood at the edge of the abandoned cemetery overlooking Clearwater, her breath forming delicate clouds in the brisk morning air. Before her, the gravestones, some leaning with age, others half hidden beneath patches of wild prairie grass, stood silent as sentries, guarding secrets older than the bones they marked. The air was heavy, as though the past itself had risen during the night, shrouded in morning mist, restless for closure. She tugged her worn riding coat tighter around her shoulders, feeling the reassuring weight of her father's engraved silver pocket watch in her pocket. The watch ticked softly, steadily, marking a rhythm Josie had known since childhood. It seemed louder here, somehow, echoing softly off tombstones engraved with forgotten names and faded dates. Each gentle tick felt like a question asked repeatedly, questions she'd deliberately ignored but could no longer avoid. Kneeling slowly beside one gravestone, weathered almost beyond recognition, she brushed her fingers across its cold surface, tracing the faint carved letters of her husband's name. James Calloway. The stone felt rough beneath her fingertips, a tangible reminder of loss she'd buried deep within herself, deeper than any of the graves before her. She'd loved James dearly, yet standing now beside his final resting place, Josie realized how little she'd truly known about his past, how little she had allowed herself to remember. A gentle rustle sounded behind her, and Josie turned quickly, heart pounding instinctively. Sheriff Elias Holt stood respectfully at the edge of the graveyard, his hat removed, his eyes gentle with understanding. Elias had always shown Josie quiet respect, a compassionate awareness of the painful memories she guarded fiercely. Now he approached carefully, his footsteps muffled by damp grass, his expression both sympathetic and wary. "Morning, Josie," Elias said softly, voice blending seamlessly into the whispering wind. "Didn't expect to see you out here this early." Josie stood slowly, forcing a faint smile. "Sometimes questions keep a body awake, Sheriff, and answers don't come easy." Elias nodded slowly, gaze lingering on the gravestone at her feet. "You find any clarity here?" Josie sighed softly, glancing back toward James's grave. "No. Only more questions. Memories that don't seem to add up anymore." Elias shifted slightly, his gaze avoiding hers momentarily, a subtle indication he knew more than he had yet revealed. "Josie, the Morgan gang isn't stopping. Isaac Rivers Ranch was just a start. Folks are scared. We gotta act careful now." She heard the quiet tension beneath his calm tone and recognized it immediately. Elias was holding something back, something painful, something personal. "Speak plain, Elias," Josie said gently, yet firmly. "Secrets ain't done us no favors lately." Elias sighed, shifting uncomfortably, eyes clouded by unspoken burdens. "Morgan ain't just hitting random places. It's like he knows exactly where to strike. He knows us, too well. And James—" Elias hesitated, voice cracking slightly with regret. "Your husband had dealings with Morgan long ago. Never told you 'cause he wanted to protect you, I reckon. But James crossed Morgan years back, took something Morgan never forgot, never forgave." Josie's throat tightened, heart aching sharply at the revelation. She glanced down again, picturing James' kind eyes, his gentle smile, unable to reconcile that image with Elias's quiet admission. "James weren't no thief, Elias," she whispered stubbornly. "He was a good man. He wouldn't—" Elias shook his head solemnly. "Wasn't about stealing, Josie. It was worse. James made promises, took secrets. Morgan's holding grudges deeper than graves. Now he's settled on revenge." Josie swallowed painfully, the weight of betrayal and loss pressing heavily. She reached again for the comfort of the watch in her pocket, its steady ticking the only reassurance amidst the chaos now swirling within her. Elias watched her quietly, respecting her struggle, offering silent support without judgment. "He kept letters," Josie finally whispered, eyes moistening slightly in the morning chill. James hid them in the old barn. I never read 'em, always afraid of what they might say. But maybe it's time I faced whatever truth he left behind." Elias nodded quietly, eyes softening with gentle sorrow. "Be careful, Josie. Some truths carry pain heavier than any grave." The sheriff stepped back respectfully, offering privacy as Josie left the cemetery. Her steps were deliberate yet burdened, heart heavy as she returned to her ranch. Each hoofbeat resonated softly, echoing Elias's painful revelations. James had hidden truths from her, and now those buried truths demanded exposure, demanded justice. Back at her ranch, Josie moved swiftly toward the old barn, pushing open doors that creaked mournfully with neglect. Sunlight filtered through weathered planks, illuminating floating dust motes like tiny golden stars drifting aimlessly. Her heart quickened as she knelt near the rear wall, fingers finding loose boards, concealing the small cash James had carefully hidden away years before. Josie removed the boards gently, reaching carefully into the dark space. Her fingers brushed against paper, dry and brittle with age. Pulling the letters free, she held them gently, heart hammering in apprehension. Sitting quietly amid the straw-strewn floor, she unfolded them carefully. James's handwriting, greeting her like a ghost, returned. His words unraveled a painful story, confessing the heavy price of his youthful dealings with Morgan. James had uncovered Morgan's crimes, atrocities hidden deep within their community. He'd tried to stop them, but threats followed swiftly. The letters detailed James's desperate attempts to protect Josie, to shield her from a dark world she knew nothing about. Tears blurred her vision as Josie realized his love had driven his secrets, his silence. His hidden truths were painful, yet noble, born of love, not betrayal. Soft footsteps broke her reverie, and Josie turned sharply, startled. Standing in the barn entrance was a man she did not recognize, tall, shadowed, cautious in his stance. His gaze swept the barn before landing carefully on Josie, assessing her calmly. "Josie Calloway?" he asked quietly, his voice steady, measured. She stood slowly. Letters clutched protectively against her chest. "Who wants to know?" "Name's Daniel Grayson," he answered evenly. "I heard whispers you're looking into Morgan's business. Reckoned you might want some help, though help might be dangerous in itself." Josie studied Daniel cautiously, sensing both competence and danger. His eyes, shadowed beneath a wide-brimmed hat, betrayed little emotion, yet hinted at a deep reservoir of hidden truths, truths that could help or harm. She nodded slowly, cautiously. "Why trust you?" Daniel stepped forward carefully, palms open and unthreatening. "I knew James once. Owed him more than a debt. He saved my life years ago. Reckon I owe him something still." Josie hesitated, torn by wariness and the hope of answers. Finally, she extended the letters toward Daniel, silently inviting trust. He read quietly, expression darkening slightly, confirming her fears. James' revelations had opened dangerous truths about Morgan's operations, secrets now putting Josie in grave danger. "These letters," Daniel murmured slowly, "mean Morgan won't ever stop, not until he settles every debt, yours included." Josie inhaled sharply, heart tightening painfully at the weight of these revelations. James's past had not merely haunted him, it had survived him, now haunting her, demanding closure. Holding her husband's faded letters in trembling hands, Josie whispered to the gathering shadows, "I've spent my life hunting secrets, but the deadliest one was always my own." As the setting sun painted the crossroads in hues of blood and gold, Josie faced a choice that felt as inevitable as the turning of the seasons. She had ridden hard from her ranch, her mind burdened with truths heavier than any iron shackle. The crossroads, marked by an ancient cottonwood tree whose twisted limbs stretched upward like pleading fingers, stood quiet in the fading daylight. The wind rustled dry leaves softly. Murmuring words she couldn't quite discern, echoing memories of decisions she'd made here long ago. Beneath that old tree, paths once taken and paths forsaken whispered to her softly, reminding Josie that choices, however noble their intent, always exacted a price. Reaching into her coat pocket, she touched her father's silver pocket watch, its smooth metal warmed by her touch. Its steady ticking marked the passage of time in a rhythm that matched her heart's uncertain beat, each tick echoing the silent questions within her soul. The crossroads had witnessed her choices before, choices that had determined who she was, who she had hoped to become. Now, as evening shadows lengthened, the paths that lay before her appeared equally fraught, offering no easy answer. A faint sound of horse hooves drew her attention toward the westward path. Daniel Grayson emerged slowly from the shadows of gathering dusk, riding a horse that seemed as wary as its rider. He dismounted cautiously, his dark gaze steady and unreadable beneath the wide brim of his hat. "Josie," Daniel greeted quietly, his voice calm, yet cautious. "Didn't know if you'd come." She nodded slightly, her expression guarded. "Didn't seem like much choice." He moved toward her carefully, glancing around the crossroads as though expecting ghosts. "Morgan's men are moving quickly. He knows you're onto him. And that makes you dangerous, someone he needs to silence." Josie's fingers tightened around the silver watch, her gaze locked onto Daniel's face. "You knew James better than you admitted, didn't you?" Daniel hesitated, eyes shadowed by something deeper than mere caution. "James tried protecting everyone, especially you. But the past has a way of crawling out from its grave." She studied him carefully, catching the subtle tension in his stance, the careful way he avoided her probing gaze. "Whose side are you on, Daniel?" He looked away briefly, jaw tightening, before meeting her gaze again, sincerity clear. "Sides shift quick in this kind of war, but I'm on James's side. And yours. I owe him that much." Josie felt the tension in her chest loosen slightly, wanting desperately to trust yet still cautious. Before she could reply, the faint rumble of approaching hooves broke the uneasy quiet. Marshal Everett Ross appeared from the southern path, riding steadily, his posture rigid with authority and quiet determination. He halted his horse a respectful distance away, the dusty road settling again into silence. "Josie Calloway," Marshal Ross called out in a clear, firm voice. "You're playing with fire. I can't have you handling this alone. We've got laws for a reason." Josie regarded the marshal steadily, noticing the seriousness etched deeply into his weathered features. "Sometimes the law moves slow, Marshal. Slow enough for good people to die, waiting for justice." Ross sighed heavily, his voice patient, yet carrying an underlying steel. "I admire your courage, Josie, but vengeance and justice aren't the same. Let us handle Morgan, officially." Daniel shifted slightly, catching Josie's gaze again, silently reminding her of their shared secret, the cache of letters, James's desperate truths. Marshal Ross knew much, but Josie doubted he fully understood the depths of betrayal hidden within Clearwater itself. Josie felt the weight of James's letters pressing insistently, demanding careful judgment. "I wish I could trust your official justice," Josie said softly, meeting Ross's eyes squarely. "But Morgan knows too many secrets. Powerful secrets, Marshal. Secrets your badge alone might not protect." Marshal Ross frowned, eyes narrowing thoughtfully. "Then help me understand, Josie. Tell me what you found." Josie hesitated, conflicted. Revealing James's letters to Ross might bring official weight to her fight, but would also expose deeply buried truths that could wound Clearwater irrevocably. Yet to remain silent would only allow the poison of secrecy to fester, unchecked and unchallenged. Her eyes drifted toward Daniel, silently questioning his trustworthiness, his willingness to accept consequences. Daniel nodded slightly, as if sensing her thoughts. Truth might be painful, but lies are worse. James knew that. He tried hiding too long, and it cost him. Josie reached slowly into her coat, pulling forth James's faded letters. The marshal dismounted slowly, accepting them with cautious reverence. His eyes scanned the pages swiftly, jaw tightening visibly as the implications sank in. "This changes everything," Ross murmured gravely. "These letters prove Morgan had help, someone powerful enough to keep Clearwater quiet all these years." Josie nodded slowly, sadness thickening her voice. "A traitor, Marshal. Someone trusted, hidden within our own people." Ross exhaled slowly, the heaviness of the moment settling deeply. "Josie, confronting this kind of corruption alone, it's suicide." Daniel stepped forward quietly, gaze steady. "She's not alone, Marshal." Ross looked sharply at Daniel, appraising him anew, recognizing quiet strength and determination behind the stranger's calm exterior. Finally, Ross nodded reluctantly. "All right, but understand clearly, the law's got boundaries. Cross them, and you'll find me standing against you." Josie met his gaze firmly, understanding and respect passing silently between them. "Understood, Marshal." Ross remounted, turning his horse back toward Clearwater. "Be careful, both of you." As the marshal's figure receded into the dusk, Josie moved slowly toward the ancient cottonwood tree, placing her palm gently against its rough bark. Beneath her fingers, the tree felt worn, marked deeply by countless seasons of wind, sun, and storm. Like her, it had stood at crossroads many times, watching silently as lives unfolded in choices that could never be unmade. Daniel moved closer, his voice quiet beside her. "He's right, Josie. This road leads somewhere dark." She sighed softly, feeling weariness heavier than physical exhaustion. "Been walking dark roads most of my life. Thought maybe I'd finally found light, but seems it never quite lasts." Before Daniel could respond, a faint glint caught her eye, a small hidden box tucked neatly beneath twisted roots protruding from the ground. Kneeling slowly, Josie tugged it free, fingers trembling as she opened it carefully. Her breath caught painfully. Sheriff Elias Holt's badge rested atop a stack of documents neatly tied in faded twine, each page damning evidence of collusion with Morgan's men. Shock tightened painfully in her chest, betrayal slicing deeper than any blade. Elias Holt, the man she'd trusted implicitly, had been compromised from the start. His quiet compassion and gentle warnings suddenly felt tainted, corrupted by hidden alliances. She stood slowly, heart aching, gaze locked upon the cold metal badge now trembling in her hand. Josie knelt beside Holt's hidden stash, heart hammering in betrayal, whispering bitterly, "Trust was always my greatest mistake." Under the pale glow of the harvest moon, the ghosts of past mistakes gathered silently, awaiting final judgment. Josie Calloway stood motionless on the weathered porch of her ranch, eyes fixed upon the silent horizon, bathed in silver moonlight. She breathed slowly, feeling the crisp night air, colder now with autumn's deepening embrace. Around her, the empty pastures stretched quietly, fences and fields muted beneath the harvest moon, casting stark shadows across the ground like quiet reminders of choices made and consequences yet to be faced. In the distance, the wind murmured gently through weathered fence posts, whispering memories Josie had once tried to bury beneath quiet days and peaceful nights. Tonight, those memories rose once more, awakened by betrayal and loss, demanding resolution, demanding justice. Josie's fingers tightened reflexively around the grip of the old revolver she had reluctantly retrieved from beneath the hearth, its smooth metal cool and familiar in her hand. Nearby, Marshal Everett Ross stood silently, watching her with wary eyes that revealed respect and quiet concern. Beside him, Daniel Grayson waited quietly, his dark, steady gaze a reassuring presence amidst turmoil. Josie could feel both men's eyes upon her, watching and waiting for the decisions only she could make, decisions she had spent her lifetime carefully avoiding. From beyond the far fields came the sound she'd been waiting for. Horses approaching slowly, deliberately, their hooves echoing softly in the silence of the moonlit night. Josie's heart quickened, her breath steadying as she stepped off the porch, ready to face the confrontation that had been building for far too long. Sheriff Elias Holt arrived first, dismounting carefully from his horse. His hat was tilted low, hiding his eyes, though the tension in his posture spoke clearly of guilt and regret. He approached Josie cautiously, his steps heavy with a burden too long carried in silence. Holt had always seemed steadfast, dependable, a figure of calm authority in a tumultuous world. Now, as he raised his eyes to meet hers, Josie saw only pain and shame reflected clearly beneath the moon's cold light. "Josie," Holt began quietly, voice trembling slightly with suppressed emotion. "I never wanted it to come to this. But Morgan, he had leverage, threatened everyone I cared about." Josie's grip on the revolver tightened instinctively, though her heart softened at the genuine anguish in his voice. She knew betrayal intimately, understood how fear and desperation could drive honorable souls toward darkness. "You could have come to me, Elias," she whispered, voice steady but filled with quiet sorrow. "We could have faced it together." He shook his head slowly, remorse etched deeply across his weathered features. "I thought I could handle it alone, protect you, protect Clearwater. But Morgan's poison runs deeper than I reckoned. He knew every weakness, every secret." Josie sighed softly, feeling his truth settle painfully within her. The ranch had always symbolized peace for her, a sanctuary carefully built from the wreckage of violence and loss. Now, even this place felt exposed, vulnerable beneath truths too long hidden. "It's time we stop hiding from him," she replied firmly, meeting Elias's eyes without anger, only determination. "Morgan can't win unless we keep silent." In the distance, another sound carried clearly. More horses approaching swiftly, urgency clear in the rapid hoofbeats. Marshal Ross stepped forward, nodding gravely to Josie. "They're coming. We have to be ready." Josie moved purposefully, positioning herself strategically, signaling quietly to Daniel and Elias to take cover near the barn, carefully choreographed movements born from years of experience. Each breath felt measured now, each heartbeat steady and calm beneath the clear autumn moonlight. The Morgan gang arrived abruptly, their dark silhouettes stark against the silver-lit landscape, their faces shadowed beneath wide-brimmed hats. Josie recognized their leader instantly, Luke Morgan, his sharp features cruel and cold even beneath moonlight. He surveyed the ranch silently, his gaze eventually resting upon Josie with a chilling smile. "You've been causing me trouble, Mrs. Calloway," Morgan called out, voice calm, yet laced with dangerous intent. "You had chances to let this go quiet. Now things get messy." Josie stepped forward slowly, revolver steady in her hand. Moonlight illuminating her resolute features. "You brought this fight to Clearwater, Luke. Your secrets ain't secrets no more." Morgan chuckled softly, humorlessly, his voice colder than autumn frost. "Secrets can be buried again, Josie. Just like your husband. Like you, if needed." Josie's heart tightened painfully, yet her resolve never wavered. Around her, she sensed Daniel and Elias shifting quietly, positioned to protect yet ready to follow her lead. She stepped closer. Defiant beneath the harvest moon. "This ends tonight, Morgan. No more fear. No more hidden truths. Clearwater deserves peace." Morgan laughed again, the sound bitter and mocking. "Peace? Your sheriff betrayed you, Josie. Even your lawman's loyalty is shaky. What peace could you possibly have?" Elias stepped slowly from the shadows, surprising Morgan with his sudden appearance, his voice clear and steady, despite obvious grief. "Peace comes from truth, Luke, even truths that hurt. I done wrong, but it stops here." Morgan's eyes narrowed, sensing the turning tide. He signaled sharply, his men moving forward aggressively, weapons drawn swiftly beneath moonlight. Gunfire erupted fiercely, shattering the quiet night, the ranch echoing with sudden violence as the peace Josie had built fractured beneath flames and lead. Josie fought calmly, deliberately, her aim steady, driven by a lifetime of quiet strength and inner resolve. Amidst chaos, she saw Elias moving bravely, fighting alongside Daniel and Marshal Ross, his courage born from desperate redemption. But Morgan was swift and ruthless, determined to claim final victory. In the heated battle, Josie turned sharply to find Morgan facing Elias directly, hatred gleaming coldly in his eyes as he aimed toward the sheriff. Time slowed impossibly. Josie raised her weapon instinctively, firing swiftly, yet Morgan's shot rang out simultaneously. She watched helplessly as Elias staggered backward, falling slowly beneath the unforgiving moonlight. With Elias's fall, Morgan hesitated briefly, his confidence shaken. Josie's heart surged painfully, grief and fury mingling fiercely as she stepped forward, gun raised steadily toward Morgan's chest. "You took enough from us, Luke. No more." Morgan regarded her coldly, sensing defeat yet unwilling to surrender. Around him, his remaining men retreated, leaving their leader abandoned beneath the stark moonlight. Josie stepped closer, her gaze fierce yet filled with a quiet compassion that unsettled him deeply. "You won't kill me," Morgan sneered bitterly. "Justice ain't your kind's way." Josie held his gaze unwaveringly. "Justice is exactly my kind's way. But you're right. I won't kill you. You'll face Clearwater, face your truths openly, and every secret you hid will unravel slowly, painfully." Marshal Ross stepped forward, weapon steady, placing Morgan securely under arrest, his movements firm, yet respectful. Josie knelt slowly beside Elias, gently cradling his head, his breathing shallow and fading. "Forgive me, Josie," Elias whispered weakly, eyes pleading desperately beneath the harvest moon's gentle glow. "I wanted to set things right." Josie smiled softly, tears blurring her vision, sorrowful yet understanding. "You did, Elias. You gave Clearwater back its truth." He managed a faint smile before closing his eyes peacefully, his final breath carrying gentle redemption into the night. Silence settled slowly, the violence fading quietly into distant echoes. The ranch once more embraced by the quiet calm Josie had always cherished. As silence settled once more over her ranch, Josie stood among shadows of the defeated, whispering softly, "Justice isn't found in revenge. It's born from forgiveness." In the gentle quiet of dawn, as sunlight touched the land with warmth like a mother's forgiving hand, Clearwater began to heal. Josie Calloway stood quietly at the crest of a low hill overlooking the town, wrapped in her worn shawl against the early morning chill. The sunrise was soft, bathing Clearwater in a warm golden glow, light slowly erasing shadows that had lingered too long. Smoke curled lazily from chimneys, mingling with morning mist drifting through quiet streets. It was a simple sight, yet for Josie, the ordinary calm carried deep significance, a sign that perhaps peace could indeed return to this land she loved deeply. Behind her stood Daniel Grayson, his quiet presence offering silent comfort and companionship. They watched Clearwater together, their silence easy, filled with shared relief and quiet respect. Near them, Marshal Everett Ross stood watching as well, his stern face softened by the gentle light of morning. Together they formed a quiet alliance, bonded by truths exposed, justice served, and wounds still tender, yet beginning to heal. Josie turned slightly, glancing down toward the engraved silver pocket watch cradled gently in her palm. Her father's watch, a relic of justice sought and justice delayed, now felt lighter somehow, its ticking softer beneath the morning's hopeful promise. She carefully tucked it back into her coat, fingers lingering briefly over its smooth metal, reassured by the familiarity of its steady rhythm. Marshal Ross stepped forward quietly, his voice low, gentle yet firm. "Morgan's awaiting trial, Josie. He won't escape judgment, not this time. Clearwater has you to thank for that." She met his gaze, offering a faint, tired smile. "Clearwater deserves peace, Marshal. That's thanks enough." Ross nodded solemnly, eyes reflecting quiet admiration. "Towns heal slowly, but today feels like the start. You gave them something back, something they'd forgotten they'd lost." Josie exhaled softly, eyes drifting again over Clearwater, feeling the warmth of sunlight dispelling lingering shadows. "Maybe we all forgot, Marshal. Forgot what justice meant, forgot how to trust each other again." Daniel stepped closer, eyes calm yet thoughtful. "Trust can be rebuilt. Takes time, but it's possible. Clearwater's stronger than Morgan's secrets, stronger than fear." Josie nodded quietly, feeling hope mingle cautiously with the sorrow still carried deeply within. Elias Holt's betrayal and redemption weighed heavily, the memory fresh and painful. Yet beneath sorrow lay quiet gratitude, gratitude for lessons learned, truths revealed, justice finally claimed. Marshal Ross turned slowly toward the path leading back to town, offering a respectful nod. "You take care now, Josie. Clearwater owes you, but so do I. You taught me justice ain't just about punishment. It's about facing truths." Josie watched Ross descend the hill quietly, his figure growing smaller, merging slowly with morning shadows. Daniel stood silently beside her, understanding her quiet reflection. After a long moment, he turned slightly, eyes filled with gentle question. "What will you do now, Josie?" he asked softly, voice calm, respectful. She considered carefully, eyes drifting toward the distant mountains beyond Clearwater, their peaks touched gently by morning's light. "Mend fences, Daniel. Raise horses. Watch over Clearwater quietly, like I always wanted." He smiled softly, nodding slowly. "Peace suits you." She exhaled quietly, sadness mingling gently with relief. Peace ain't something that stays unless we guard it. But maybe now it's got a chance. Together, they descended the hill, footsteps gentle on the soft earth, heading quietly toward Josie's ranch. The morning breeze carried whispers of renewal, softly rustling through tall grasses, gently stirring branches overhead. It felt peaceful, hopeful, a sign that Clearwater might indeed emerge stronger from shadows of past wrongs. At her ranch, Josie felt the comfort of familiar routines return, feeding horses, mending broken fences, repairing damage left behind. The quiet tasks brought solace, allowing time to reflect, to heal, to forgive. As days passed quietly, neighbors appeared slowly, hesitant yet genuine, offering help, shared smiles, cautious trust returning carefully to their eyes. Clearwater was indeed healing. Yet one quiet evening, as Josie rested on her porch beneath twilight's gentle embrace, a rider appeared unexpectedly at the edge of her property. Josie stood slowly, heart quickening with wary uncertainty. Marshal Ross dismounted slowly, expression serious, holding something carefully in his hand. "Josie," Ross greeted quietly, voice gentle yet troubled. "Morgan confessed more than we thought. Secrets deeper than Clearwater. I reckoned you ought to see this yourself." He handed her an envelope, yellowed and fragile with age, sealed carefully. Josie opened it slowly, breath catching sharply as she recognized James's handwriting, words written years ago, yet clearly intended to be delivered should anything befall him. Her hands trembled slightly, heart racing as she unfolded the pages carefully. In his letter, James detailed truths even deeper than previously revealed, truths linking Morgan's corruption to prominent names beyond Clearwater, crimes hidden skillfully behind power and influence. Josie read slowly, eyes blurring slightly, realizing the full scope of James's courage, his determination to protect others despite overwhelming risk. Marshal Ross watched quietly, respectfully, sensing the gravity of James' final revelations. Morgan named others, men in positions powerful enough to bury any truth. James knew them, recorded their secrets, their dealings. He trusted someday you'd find the courage to finish what he began. Josie exhaled softly, heart tightening painfully with grief, yet filling simultaneously with admiration, love, quiet pride. James had indeed loved justice, deeply enough to risk everything. She refolded the letter carefully, clutching it protectively against her heart. Marshal Ross sighed softly, eyes understanding, yet cautious. Josie, exposing these men. It's dangerous. They'll fight hard, hide behind power. She met his gaze calmly, resolve steady beneath sorrow. James risked everything to do right, Marshal. Clearwater deserves justice, not just here, but everywhere. Ross nodded gravely, respecting her quiet strength. Then justice it is. But you're not alone, Josie. Clearwater stands with you. As Ross departed quietly, Josie returned slowly to her porch, staring thoughtfully at distant mountains. Daniel emerged quietly from the barn, sensing trouble, moving to her side silently. She showed him James's letter, watching his expression harden with quiet determination. "You could walk away," Daniel said softly, though admiration shone deeply in his eyes. Josie shook her head gently, eyes steady, clear beneath twilight. "Truth don't walk away. Neither can I." Together they stood quietly, watching stars appear slowly overhead. The quiet night embracing them gently. Josie felt the weight of James' truths settle heavily. Yet beneath weight lay quiet strength, strength born from justice pursued, truths honored, courage undaunted. Later that night, beneath moonlight spilling softly through window panes, Josie carefully placed James's final letter beside her father's silver watch, relics of justice carried quietly through generations. The room felt peaceful, filled gently with presence beyond sight, yet deeply felt. Her father, James, Elias, souls honored through courage, sacrifice, forgiveness. As Josie closed her eyes gently, she whispered softly into quiet darkness, voice steady, heart resolute. Peace ain't given. It's earned, protected, defended. And justice isn't something we choose. It's something that chooses us. Just as sleep began softly claiming her, the distant sound of approaching horses drifted quietly through open windows, breaking the gentle night. Josie rose slowly, heart quickening, sensing immediately danger approaching once more. Stepping onto her porch, she watched silently as riders emerged from shadows, faces hidden beneath darkness, yet intent unmistakable. In her doorway, gripping her revolver steadily, Josie faced shadows born from secrets she'd sworn to uncover, whispering fiercely, "Some truths refuse to stay buried." And so the dust has settled where it once rose in clouds behind galloping hooves, and the wind now drifts softer through the broken boards of old barns and empty pews, telling only those who choose to listen what passed in that quiet corner of the West. The sound of that wind carries 1,000 memories, of letters penned with trembling hands, of leather boots that once trod hesitantly over unforgiving ground, of a silver pocket watch ticking steadily, even as hearts broke quietly beside it, and of voices once hushed now rising like smoke from chimneys, curling into the sky, whispering that not all was lost. There is still the creak of a rocking chair, where Josie once sat watching the light fade over the hills, and the warm scent of cornbread cooling on a windowsill she never thought would feel like home again. There is still the print of a man's boot beside her own, pressed into the porch dust, like a promise too soft to speak aloud, and the echo of a marshal's oath not to law, but to the kind of justice that lingers long after the ink on any warrant fades. The fields have grown back tall where they'd once been burned, the fences mended with hands that once trembled, but now work steady. And each sunrise feels a little less like grief and more like beginning. In the town of Clearwater, folks walk a little taller, not because the weight has vanished, but because it's shared now, spread between widows, ranchers, children who laugh again beneath the cottonwoods, and strangers who choose to stay. The church bell still rings, though its rope is frayed, and the sound it makes is not just a call to worship, but a call to remember. Elias Holt's quiet redemption. Daniel Grayson's loyalty earned not by blood, but by choice, and James Calloway's truth scrawled across the pages of a life he tried too long to shield from pain. The twilight that once cloaked secrets now reveals small good things. A boy tying a horse to the post out front of the general store. A woman sweeping her porch with a rhythm that matches the beating of her healing heart. The soft thud of boots on boardwalks now cleared of fear. Somewhere on the wind, there is still the faint sound of her voice, steady, calm, not loud, but sure, saying no more running, no more silence, no more letting history write itself without her hand upon the page. And the prairie, though unchanged in its vastness, holds something new within it now. Not just silence, but understanding. Not just survival, but meaning. The truth remains, like a scar worn with pride, that honor can be buried, but not erased, and justice, though it limps behind sorrow, will always arrive before despair settles in for good. Josie was never looking to be remembered, never wanted songs or statues, but her quiet resistance against forgetting became the story that saved a town. And maybe more than that, a generation's worth of kindness. The world may not always listen to a woman who keeps truth in her hands like prayer beads, but truth doesn't need to be believed by all. It only needs one person brave enough to carry it forward, through storms, through betrayal, through years of silence, and whisper it gently into the ear of someone who still hopes. If you've ever found yourself holding on to something because no one else would, some old letter, some old promise, some flicker of decency when the world seemed cruel, then maybe you too know what it means to be that person. Maybe you too understand that saving the world doesn't start with a war. It starts with a woman lighting a lamp and reading what was never meant to be forgotten. So if the story moved you, if somewhere deep inside you still believe in second chances, in justice worth waiting for, in the fragile, enduring power of quiet, good people, leave something behind, a sign that you were here, that you remember. And if you'd sit a spell and hear another story told slow and honest like this one, settle in by the fire and subscribe to our channel, where the past ain't just history, it's a living thing. And stories like Josie's are still being whispered under twilight skies, waiting to be heard again.